Okay, there we are. Welcome, Kate Joyner, to the listening.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah. Where are you this morning?
I'm based on Dartmoor National Park in Devon.
The tours. Oh, I love it up there. Are you so whereabout? Northeast, southwest? Whereabouts are you?
I'm kind of northeast. I'm kind of like up the left-hand corner, in between Lustley and Morton Hempstead.
So are you quite high up? Are you actually up, getting up onto the high ground, or?
I can see the High Moor from the back of my place, yeah, and yeah, just very close within that, close to kind of Chagford and that kind of area.
God, it's such an amazing landscape.
It really is.
Yeah, I really like it. I spent when was that? It wasn't last summer, maybe the summer before. I spent a week just sort of wild camping on the River Dart, high up, sort of high up, in a place called Huckabee, which you probably know. Do you know Huckabee? It's a little village, tiny little place.
Okay, I don't know Huckabee, but it's good to know.
Really, yeah, worth having a look. But the river there is so beautiful because it's quite narrow and it's full of big boulders. And every morning we got in the river. Oh, just incredible, like being born again.
Yeah, Dartmoor has a very special, potent energy about it.
Yeah, those rocks. I'm quite into rocks. It's strange because I'm in Norfolk where there isn't any rock. There's a bit of chalk and there's flint in the ground, but I do miss. I occasionally just have to go somewhere where it's rock, to get to plug in again. So, have you been there a long time? Is this?
I've been here since October, and I've been back in England for about a year and a half. I've moved quite internationally over the course of my life and have felt that Dartmoor has called me home. So about maybe 2.5 years ago. So now I listened to that call and here I am, and reweaving myself, my English blood and roots back into this land.
So is that where you grew up as well then?
No, I grew up in Shropshire.
Okay, so not so far away then. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's
Well, to me,
4 hours away.
I think Shropshire, it's just north of that area of Somerset and then moving across. I mean, I guess it's not that close, but in my mind, that whole west area, there's a relationship between those places for me. Yeah, Shropshire, a very beautiful place that I haven't seen enough of. I'm quite inspired by Robert Hart, who had the forest garden there years ago. But yeah, so why Dartmoor? What was it about Dartmoor that called you in?
I don't think it's something I can rationally explain. It's more like it feels like a calling. It feels like there's a conversation with the medicine of this land and everything that I've been called to in this lifetime so far. I was with two of my teachers here in I think 2017. Not sure the exact year, but we were in between programs at Schumacher and we came for a walk on the moor. And it was really, I was living in Barcelona at the time, and it was a really strong call. It was like, oh, and I turned to them and I think that the moor's calling me home. And it would surprise me because I never really thought I'd live in England, because I've lived in many different countries in the last 15, 20 years. And so I was like, oh, that's really surprising. And here I am. So it's more of a, it feels more like I'm meant to be here. And I don't, it's beyond words. I don't think I can really explain it, but there's, what I love about being here is the wildness of this land. It still pertains, like it's untouched, still has a lot of the prehistoric memory in the ground because it's preserved, it's national park. So I feel like my psyche is really at home in this landscape, and the more that I'm here, the more that I'm attuning. So I really feel like, this is home, and I've got the rest of my life to lean into this, to the way that the land wants to speak to me, and I'm delighted about that.
Wow, so you had quite an initiation then with the lockdown. It's like you've come to this decision, and then you've gone through the kind of a real intense beginning, maybe, I don't know, maybe quite useful in some ways.
Oh yeah, I think because I have traveled so much and moved and been exploring and been discovering, that it was actually, I think for me I was like, oh wow, I don't have to go anywhere. It's the first, year that I haven't traveled, 2 or 3 times. Like last year I was fortunate to make it to Crete for the summer, but I had, another few journeys programmed, and they didn't happen. So it's actually, there is a blessing in it for sure.
So you say, I get that it's not easy to rationalize or put into language the nature of the calling, but how did you experience that initial? Was it some kind of, was it physical sensations or emotions or combination, or what was the nature of, how did you know that it was calling to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. It is more like a knowing. It's just like like, I guess through my own soul journey and traversing really deep with the feminine and also with nature-based mysteries, tuning my psyche into that way of knowing, that consciousness. It's almost like it's a knowing beyond my kind of own egoic preference or rationale. It's more kind of like a deep attunement to the eros of living. And so that goes away from my personal rational egoic strategy mind, and it's more kind of when things come, it's like it's just a knowing. It's like, oh, and it's more, it feels like it's the way that the life is guiding me and shaping me. And because of my journey, I've spent 20 years walking in the mystery without very much kind of influence from the external kind of pressures. I've really learned to trust that and learned to respond to that and fall into it and to walk with it. So that's really how my life is shaped, and it's just become a way of being for me. And so I don't, and it's a consciousness that I've cultivated through my life journey and my life experiences.
So how does that knowing show up though, actually? How do you know you're knowing? What's your actual experience when that's going on? I'm pushing it a little bit because I'm really fascinated in people's experiences of these other states or different ways of relating to the world, or and
Yeah.
the only way you know something is happening usually is there's some kind of symptoms in your, either either you hear things or you see things or you feel things, or so I'm just interested in if you that's something you're willing to talk about, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a whole body recognition. It's and it can come in, deep sensation, and it can come in deep feeling states, suddenly being cracked open by a grief or it can come through image, through the imagination. It can come through like a heart resonance of like, oh, I just know that that's what I need to do. And quite often it can be quite surprising because it can be not what my mind has plotted or planned or think that that's the trajectory. and so it's really just like, in a way, it's like when something reveals itself to you, and something that you hadn't seen before, but it becomes apparent, and it's like a wow, okay. And that can resonate on all of these levels, from sensation, from feeling, to the image, and then my mind has the task of making sense of it.
And is it something that you have developed? Is it like a muscle that if you exercise this connection, this awareness, that it becomes increasing? And is it something that's there all the time, or does it come and go?
For me, it's there all the time, because it's, as I said, it's been the way that I've walked. And yeah, I think, our culture indoctrinates us into a way of being and a way of doing in the world that is very rigid and very controlling, and has us in alignment with the values of a culture that really is killing us as human beings. And so everything, tapping into that way of knowing is more kind of like an unplugging from the matrix. It's kind of like getting into your body, getting into your feelings, getting to know the wisdom of your feelings, cultivating the deep imagination, kind of more of these repressed, mistrusted, unknown kind of aspects, unseen aspects of our human design. And those are really undeveloped in our culture. The thinking mind is very developed, but our feeling, imaginative, sensing capacities are like, well, what, you're just going to go on a feeling, but they're very judged and criticized, and then people don't trust themselves, they don't trust their own, and all of these qualities lead to our own inner authority, and ultimately, when we're in touch with authority, then we become the creators and the designers and the artists of our own lives. So in a culture that wants us to kind of be clogs in the machine, of course it's not going to favor the cultivation of these qualities that would effectively have us operating as thriving individuals. So yeah, I think I'm very anti the culture that is the mainstream culture, and have lived a very out of the mainstream culture life. And as a result, have cultivated capacities that allow me to live in more attunement with a way of being that is pro-life and in service of life. And in that, I've also cultivated my work to be able to guide others into aligning and attuning with that within themselves.
Yeah, it seems like it was a sort of product of industrialization and science that we just culturally just went into our heads and almost severed the rest of our body. And really, it's my understanding as to why we've, poisoned and desecrated the earth, the living earth, the environment, the ecosystems, is because we just cut ourselves off from those things. But what's exciting is that clearly that's all falling apart now. And there is this incredible uprising of body intelligence, what I would call gut intelligence and heart intelligence. And it's interesting to hear you talk about that as a way of getting back your own authority, your own sovereignty, because it really is. Because these things, they don't lie to you, in my experience. Like my heart and certainly not my gut. Maybe my heart can be a little bit manipulated by the mind, but my gut speaks its truth instantaneously, well beyond or quicker rather than thought. By the time thought has even realized there's something to think about, my body's already done the whole process of working something out. So it's a really interesting time, because these energies, these intelligences rather, that have been squashed down by our culture are bursting out again. And of course, there'll be a bit of a reactionary time, which is probably, you know, from hearing the little bit of your story now and recognizing my own path as well, was a kind of reaction to the head thing and a pulling away. But now I've gone as far as I could go there, and in recent years I've been heading back towards bringing it all into balance now, because we do need this, but just maybe only like 5% of the time, not 95% of the time. And these other intelligences, you know, really almost should be leading, I feel, especially the heart right now, you know. Ooh, we need some heart. We need some heart in the world. And it's coming up. Um, so I'm intrigued as to how your journey began on the, you know, before. There's a whole story of you going off, I imagine, before coming back to Dartmoor. So, well, clearly there is. So, when, or at what point, even in your earliest memory, did did this journey begin for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it began when I came from the Stardust, really. I kind of came in, and I always had this acute feeling that there was something missing. And then that was kind of further deepened when I went through, I think, maybe one of the major initiatory crises of my life when I was 19 and my dad died. And was so bereft and so distraught of this loss, you know, one of the great beings of my life, the great loves, and was catapulted really to leave everything behind and just go searching for the deeper meaning of this life, because at that point nothing in my life made sense. And so I'd always traveled with my dad. He'd always taken us out of school, and he was like, you're going to learn more out of school than you are in school. And we used to go traveling like 3 or 4 times a year. So by the time I was 19, the only continent I hadn't been to was South America. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go to South America. And every time we traveled, we never spoke any other language. We spoke English. So I knew I wanted to learn Spanish before I went, so I could communicate with the locals. So I went to Spain and I learned Spanish. And then when I felt like más o menos that my Spanish was okay, I went over to South America, and I didn't come back for 7 years. I spent 7 years over there. And I ended up joining the circus. So I ran away and joined the circus. And then I also, that led me to dance. So I studied Afro-Cuban, Afro-Brazilian. I lived in Mexico, Cuba, Brazil during those 7 years. So yeah, I studied Afro-Cuban, Afro-Brazilian. And then eventually retook my studies in psychotherapy again. So I trained as a Gestalt psychotherapist out in Brazil. And ways of leaning into the mystery and totally just giving myself to the journey, and met with medicine women, medicine men, shamans, astrologers, tarot readers, you know, all of the like alternative, otherworldly arts, I guess. And, you know, like memories of dancing at bus stops with Cubans, you know, dancing around a bottle of rum, and, you know, being in Mexico and all of the traditions and all of the folklore and all of the history that's all in that land still deeply steeped. And so I started to really get the medicine of the South as well, like South America. You know, it's quite a bodily sensual, there's a freedom of sexuality, there's a liberation, they're more earth-based, it's a completely different consciousness from how we relate to life in the north. And there's many prophecies about the north and the south coming together to heal the culture. And so I was really immersed in it, and really, I spoke fluent Portuguese, I spoke fluent Spanish, and I kind of was quite reptilian in a way, because I really adapted to the cultures as well. And I had lives there, I had friends, I had really immersed myself. And then after 7 years, it was clear that I was called home again. So I came home and tried to kind of establish a normal life, but it was very clear that wasn't meant for me. And I was going through my Saturn return at the time, and I was trying to fit myself back into this box, and everything in my being was just like, this isn't for you. And it was very grace to find some guides at that time that could really take me through the initiation that I wanted to, because up until then my initiation had been really self-led, and my discovery had been following my own nose. And then these guides, these elders, could really take me through the psycho-spiritual depths that I needed to go to really embrace the depth of my soul.
So what was it that
And
was
so I
calling you home, if I could jump in for a second? Because that bit, what was it that made you decide, oh, I've got to go back home?
again, it was just a knowing. I think there's something archetypal about the 7 years. Also my family, my gran was losing her eyesight, and I wanted her to be able to see me. I wanted to see her. It just archetypally, a 7-year cycle. It felt like whatever I needed to learn there was complete. So yeah.
Sorry, I stopped your flow then. So you realised that
Yeah.
that you're that you'd done as much as you could do under your own kind of wandering, and now you needed help from experienced guides to
Well, it just kind of fell
go
into
further.
place. Yeah, it was just more like the natural unfolding. So I kind of, was going through my Saturn return and very confused about,
Talk
having,
about that, because a lot of people won't know what you mean by that.
Oh, so the Saturn return is I don't know much about it, but the astrological event that happens at the end of your 20s, so 28 to 30. And it's really, my understanding is that, I'm not an astrologer, but it's really when Saturn returns to the same point in your chart when you were born, and it's to break down the old structures that perhaps are not supporting your evolution. And so it can be a very turbulent, challenging, confusing time, because it feels like everything's crumbling away and you've got nothing to hold on to. But really what's happening is the things that aren't going to serve you in the next 28 years of your evolution are falling away, so that you can step more fully into your soul path. And so, many people can hold on at this stage, and then they can stay stuck in that pattern. But if you know that this is what's happening and you can let it happen, then you're essentially, you shed the skins that you need to shed in order to go through.
Okay.
So yeah, at that time I was just graced to be found by guides, and I was working as a Gestalt psychotherapist and started to get into ecotherapy. I did a year-long initiation into the deep feminine with a teacher of mine, and then I simultaneously in that year was studying ecopsychology. And so I started to see the parallels between what was happening between Earth's body and woman's body, and there was a correlation between the repression of both, and the dishonoring and the disservice, and so it was kind of like an ecological feminine awakening during that year of 2012. And then I got into the work of Bill Plotkin in the States, and and did a program with him in 2013 in Scotland. And 2 weeks after that program, there was a voice in me. I came off that program and the voice was like, go to America, go to America, go to America. And I'd be like, I was brushing my teeth and I would be like, the voice would be like, go to, I was like, I've just come home to England. Like, I've just moved to Devon and I'm here to stay and I'm not moving anywhere ever again. This is it. I'm done moving. And I would be like, and it would wake me up in the middle of the night and be like, go to America. And I'd be like, oh, what? You want me to go to America? And so 2 weeks after that program, I'd handed in my application to do a year-long program with Animus. And 2 months later, I packed up everything again and I was on the plane to the States. And that precipitated another 7-year cycle of going through this really deep initiatory journey through the work with Animus Valley, apprenticing with them. Also, I mean, the story goes deep, so I don't know how much.
Talk a bit about what you were actually doing there at Animus Valley. What was the process that you were learning about?
Well, the initial program that I did with Animus Valley was a year-long program. So it was, I think it's called Cultivating Soul-Infused Artistry and Leadership in a Time of Global Change. So really the program is about, it's a descent into the underworld. So it's, we go through a year-long program that takes us into the psycho-spiritual depths of the underworld, and there the deeper mysteries of your life are revealed. If you're lucky, if you're ready, you have to be psycho-spiritually prepared and ready for such revelation. And so the deeper mysteries of your life are revealed through this deep conversation with the natural world. There's all methods that Bill has created over the course of his life, that he calls soulcraft. And so we're kind of guided through this journey where we are led into this deep conversation with soul, and then the deeper mystery of our life, the deeper soul mystery of our life is revealed to us. And if it's our time and if we're ready, we say yes to the destiny of that soul. And then our life, at that point, he says our life becomes, it's at that point of soul initiation that we become true adults. Before that, we're just adolescents, and which is what our culture is. It's a patho-adolescent culture. So it's only at the point of soul initiation where you say yes to the deeper destiny of your life and living that in the world that you step into true adulthood.
So
so that was the journey.
It's an exploration of these hidden parts of yourself and even the greater self, or connections with things bigger than you. That's kind of, you, by spending time and exploring and using techniques to go and journey around those places within you and further afield, you're then actually finding your way towards becoming an adult, which, as you say, is basically absent. There is no adult initiation in our culture. In some ways, women have it because physically they become women when they bleed for the first time. So that's a kind of biological initiation. But men, for sure, don't have anything in our culture, or they kind of try and create stuff themselves as adolescents by, drinking, whatever, because there is no guidance, because nobody's taking them on that journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're describing here is something called the rite of passage. And so what I'm describing, the work with Animus, is soul initiation. It's not so much adult initiation, it's soul initiation.
So tell me, so what's the difference there? Because that's important.
Well, this would be, anybody that wants to go really deep into this can really go into Bill's work. He's just written a book called The Journey of Soul Initiation, and he's got 3 other books. But The Journey of Soul Initiation by him, that's just come out this year, really goes into depth of what soul initiation is. So soul, the way that Bill defines soul, is our unique ecological niche. So like the butterfly that knows how to fly, how to go into the chrysalis and become a butterfly, the caterpillar to the butterfly, like the birds that know how to migrate from the north to the south, like the whales that know how to move. We as humans also have this ecological niche. We have this inner knowing of our unique place and how we are to inhabit the world from a consciousness that's deeply woven within the consciousness of Earth and the matrix of Earth. And we've been removed from that because we've been everything that we were talking about at the beginning, because our culture has us functioning in a way that keeps us away from our innate indigenosity and belonging and connection to the natural world. So within that connection is our unique ecological niche reveals itself as our place. It's our destiny. It's our gift. It's our unique way that we're here to show up in the world.
So
And
it's
so,
our true nature, are really essentially who we really are.
sure, yeah. And this
That
reveals
speaks
itself,
to that.
yeah, reveals itself through image. And so what happens that when you start to lean into this conversation, when you say, okay, we kind of go through a crisis of like, what's the deeper, we've got everything, we've got a house, we've got a family, we've got a job, and yet everything seems so empty and so void. And a lot of people enter into a kind of existential crisis that is called the calling. And many people don't really know that it's a calling, that it's an actual thing. And what they'll do is think that there's something wrong with them and that they need to get fixed. And so they'll go to a psychotherapist, and a really bad psychotherapist will try and fix them and put them back into their place in the culture. But really the elders and the initiates know that that's the calling, and they know that they're being called to stride deeper into the deeper mysteries of their life. And so at that point, it's a crisis point, because you're called to go beyond what you've known and step into the unknown. And in that's the descent into the underworld.
So it's a kind of death, isn't it? Rather than, as you were saying, that sort of fix you and make you right and stick you back in so you're functioning. It's actually an acknowledgement that no, that old self doesn't serve you anymore. Now needs to die.
Exactly.
So this deeper, more meaningful, more soul aligned self can be born.
Exactly.
So the underworld trip is really about dying and then going into this mysterious place
That's it,
to
Tim.
find the new person who needs to be born.
Yeah. Find who you truly are at your core. Like, if you think about all the great artists and all the revolutionaries, and they've birthed, and all the great thinkers and the philosophers, it's not because they've stayed within the box of contemporary civilization. It's like they've had to go out and wander. And the beauty of nature, the nature connection, is that really all of that wisdom is in the natural world if we know how to open ourselves and listen and receive. It's like, Buddha, he reached enlightenment by sitting under a tree.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, and there's, people who dwell in caves, people that, it's like that connection with the natural world is what brings us back to ourselves. And we can't find that in the confines of a box and in a culture that boxes us. So we have to, like you've very beautifully said and named, it is the dying to that way, to a certain orientation to the world that then enables us to go. It's like, I remember watching Danger Mouse when I was a kid, and Danger Mouse is flying through the space with is it Penfold, his friend?
Penfold, yeah.
Yeah. And then they get to the edge of space, and on the cartoon they fly off the map, and then it's like, oh, we've gone off the map. And so in the cartoon they like draw a bit more on the map. So it's like, we have to go to the edge of the map and then like jump off, go off the edge, and then we get to like find what's on the edge of the map, what hasn't been discovered yet. And then we get to draw, and then we get to amplify the sense of creation. We can't, if we stay within the map, then we're never going to know what's beyond the map. So it's a bit like that. It's a bit like Danger Mouse.
Yeah, and beyond fear as well, because that's the other thing, isn't it? The unknown is also a place of fear for a lot of people, and there, as is the underworld for good
For a
reason.
lot of people, yeah.
And you know,
Yeah,
there's a lot of that's where the gold is. You have to, you know, it's underneath the dragon. You can't just go
exactly.
to the supermarket and get it. You have to go and you know, sort of tiptoe around the dragon's feet. Um, yeah, it's fascinating. There's so many kind of stories and metaphors about um, this journey. You know, I think of even the Christian tradition, which kind of is the basis for our culture, has the 40 days and 40 nights in the desert, you know. And
Mm, mm,
you know, Jesus goes off to
mm,
the desert. But this, what fascinates me, and this is exciting to me to talk about, is this connection with the land that you're talking about, and the land being a place where you can go, where all of the answers are there, or everything, and the challenges. It's the context, it's the perfect place for you to go and have this exploration because, well, for me, because it's part of us, it's just a deeper, more extended part of who we are. You know, I call, for me, the land is the greater body. You know, once you connect into your body, if you carry on in that connection, it's inevitable that you connect to the land and everything
mm,
else living because it is all completely woven together. So,
yeah.
this kind of remembering, literally remembering, as in, you know, reawakening an awareness of the body and remembering the land itself is something that fascinates me because that's something I did a sort of weird
Mhm,
version of this journey, almost the kind of opposite to you, which is quite interesting because you went off around the world. I came to the woods here in Norfolk, probably at that time of crisis you were talking about, the Saturn return, which I didn't know about or any of that. But it was like I was just sort of turning, or I just turned 30, and it was kind of like I was in London and none of that was working, and I was in a whole crisis. But rather than going off on a journey, I went inward. I retreated. I did the kind of hermit thing. I went to the woods, closed the door on the world, and just and fell into a whole kind of initiation that I didn't wasn't planning or expecting, which was the land itself took me in and was my guide and teacher. And over
mhm,
the years that passed, I got deeper and deeper into connection with it, and all of these things were being revealed through it. And you
mhm,
know, the main lesson has just been this remembering the earth and the land and the living land and how important it is. And now I see it as absolutely essential for any future we might have. We need to develop a relationship with the land again. We need to fall in love with the land again where we live and have a really meaningful, intimate
mhm,
relationship with it because that is the basis of everything: culture, well-being,
mhm,
whatever you want to talk about. If there's no connection or relationship or honoring, and it's a form of worship as well. I mean, it's a sacred relationship. It's all the relationships. It's sexual, it's sacred, it's practical, everyday resource exchange. It does all those things, and if we find our way back to that, it's so nourishing, it's so giving, it's it's really like coming home. I My feeling of it is it's the great mother that everyone can come home to at any time, and it will always give in
mhm.
that way. Yeah. What? So talk a bit more
Yeah,
about your because
that's interesting.
it's clear that you know you have some sort of understanding and knowledge of this as well. Or I'd like to hear your kind of angle on that.
Yeah, well, I'm a nature-based soul initiation guide now, so I've trained extensively with Animus Valley Institute, and I'm the first European soul initiation guide. So it's interesting you and
let's just pause it a second because your screen's gone, your connection's really slow here. I'm just wondering if you kind of rejoin the meeting, it might.
I can probably switch up my internet connection, so let me just do that.
Would you want to try that? I'll just pause it a second. Yeah, there we are. Technical hitch.
Yeah, so yeah. Well, I'm a nature-based soul initiation guide, as well as bringing, and something you said there about Mother Earth, and we can all come home to her. And one of the things that my work is evolving into is the exploration of Eros and the importance of Eros and the reclamation of Eros. And so I'm really curious about how we see her as lover, and what would it be like if we were to embrace and treat and walk upon Earth as if she were our lover. Because the mother it can be taking, and she's giving, and she's resourcing, and when you're in love, when you love somebody, you're also you're in that reciprocity, so you're also giving back. So to really reframe that orientation of Mother Earth to lover, and what would that be like?
Yeah.
So I mean, and that's just
to quickly
a
say
concept.
That's a really interesting reframing of all of that, because it is we have been taking so much, but this idea of reciprocal love and exchange, that's a really powerful one. That's a great image for a more healthy way, or the next step for us, I think. Carry on.
Yeah, and also evoking our own, for me, the soul journey and the feminine journey and the journey back to love is really the love, to the deep eros of living. So not just like the fluffy pink clouds, but the recognition of like God, love is a God. And if we are to really fully embrace love, then we're going to be reckoned with. And so the journey back to love, which is the journey back to source, which is the journey back to Mother or Love, and our true expression, like the true sovereignty, the true heaven here on earth, will undo us and initiate us and make us, and peel back all of the core layers and defenses that we have against this really precious experience of divinity as a human being on this journey called life. So that's kind of where I'm in relationship to. I can't remember your original question now, but I think that answers it.
Yeah, no, you were just talking about what you were now doing through your work, people on these. Maybe talk a little bit more about what you actually do with people as what is the process of what you do.
So I really work with cultivating our feminine eros, our feminine erotic, and I do that at the moment, through a 3-spiral journey called Elemental Eros, the Spiral 1, Spiral 2, and Spiral 3. And it really is, at the core of us, you could say this soul place, there's a deep myth, or there's a song, or there's a poem. And so what I'm really guiding women into is to becoming their poetry. So if we become our poetry, we unearth the deep myth of our lives. But I'm also really interested in not just writing and say, oh yeah, because people can write a poem, and but to actually become your poetry is to become the embodiment of your eros, which is to become the embodiment of your love, which is to become the embodiment of your soul. And that to come into that is an initiatory journey. We have to descend into the depth of, it's like Psyche and Eros. Psyche was unconsciously making out with Eros in the darkness, didn't really know who the dude was. And then, her curiosity sparked and she lit the candle and he fled and she was bereft because she'd experienced this love, but she couldn't handle it from a place of unconsciousness. She couldn't handle it, so she had to go. Aphrodite sent her on this initiatory journey where she had to descend into the underworld and come back, and then she was ready for Eros. Then she was ready for love. We as a culture think that love is fluffy and pink and a teddy bear, and really it's a god. It's like love is a natural god, and so we unconsciously think that we can create love and be, but it's like we're so unprepared and undeveloped as individuals from our cultural conditioning to really, really step into the full emanation of love. So we have to go on an initiatory journey, and learn and unearth and shed and, like you said, die to the old ways, so that we can really handle what it means to step into the embodiment of our eros, of our poetry, of our soul. And that is, that for me is the deepest love affair we can conjure in this lifetime. I call it, breaking out from a too small story of love to the largest love affair we can conjure in this lifetime. And it's such a mystery. I could go on, so I'm going to go on for a little bit. We think that love is like something that happens with two people, and the erotic mainly happens in the bedroom, but really love is a lifestyle. It's a romance of the world.
I'm losing you again.
And the erotic is
us again. There we are.
Yeah, so I think what I was saying was this reduction of eros to the bedroom and love to, and just in coupled relationships, and it puts so much pressure and so much distortion into this, that it really, like, if we take the god, if we take the divinity, if we take the connection to the mystery out of love and eros, then, and we put all of that into our human relating, it's like an impossible task. And yet the fundamental longing of the human soul to know that is so real and so true, and so why we're here. It's the meaning of our existence. And then we put all of that into a human being, and it's just like, without any concept or any connection to, or any initiation into our own knowing of eros. And of course it's not going to go so well because it's more than two human beings can handle in the unconsciousness of it all. So it's really
it's
like
context. It's that we're ripping it out of the context of the whole living world.
mm-hmm.
And we're putting it into two people, sticking them in a box, and it's this kind of nuclear family insanity, that ensues. Or even if it's not a family, because it doesn't have that context,
mm-hmm.
it doesn't. It's
Yeah.
so intense and overwhelming for most people. Some people, I don't know how they do it, but they manage to kind of stay in there. But this is it's an interesting angle for looking at why it's so hard to have a relationship in that way, because it makes a lot more sense to me to think of it as this: you just become part of a bigger thing, and it's not just between you and this other person, it's between you both and everything.
Exactly.
So there's this massive space suddenly, and there's this real you can kind of take the lead or you can follow. There's a kind of dance goes on then between you and everything, which takes all the pressure off, and has so many more dimensions to it and areas of exploration, and an endless kind of exploration. You could never, like, there'd never be that sort of typical honeymoon period where, oh, that's over now, because it's infinite what you could kind of explore and find out and learn about yourself and each other and the world, right? So
Yeah,
it
like every
completely
day.
changes the whole concept of a relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Every day is a honeymoon. I mean, even if you're not in a relationship, that's the funny thing when you're tapped into your eros. It's not about being, this, I think there's so much emphasis and so much suffering and so much, but that's really part of the wound of our culture as well. And, when we're tapped into that source, it's like, you are love. So, and if you're in relationship, you get to share that. And if you're not, you also get to share that because you're in touch with the source. And so, yeah, that's
So
what.
everything is your lover, basically, in that sort of way of
Exactly.
looking at it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really nice way to see it. Like, it's so completely different. Um, yeah, that's a new way. I mean, it's kind of what I intuitively knew, but until you've kind of said it like that, now it suddenly seems really obvious that this is it. It's this massive context shifter, from this very narrow band to
Yeah.
something that's has no boundary in one sense,
Yeah.
or no limit.
Exactly. And it just, love doesn't have any limit. And, as humans, we put the boundaries in place to create that for ourselves. But something I wanted to say, well, where's my thread? Oh yeah, because it's very intimate. It's very intimate to open yourself up to that expansion of love, and to be and to embody and to express and to let yourself be seen in that way. This is why we keep it for our, one person in our bedroom and I'm not talking about being overtly hypersexual. I think that's also a distortion of the erotic, but I'm talking about just the intimacy of revealing who you are and your truth. And so when we, it's like, this is why it's so much easier to keep it hidden and keep it in this, keep our secrets, keep who we really are, keep what we really think. But then it creates just this superficial level of being in the world, and where we're dissatisfied, we're not being met, and we're hungry, and we go through this life feeling like not touching the real truth and the real depth of what it means to fully live in this life.
So why do you think that is? Why do you think there is that fear? I guess it's a fear thing, right? What are we afraid of, or how do we get to that place where we've kept ourselves so small and hidden, and we're so afraid of revealing that, or
Yeah.
really showing up as who we are? What do you think that is?
Well, in my cosmology and perspective and knowing, it's really the suppression of the feminine. And when I speak of the feminine, it's the feminine part of both that's present in both men and women and all the other colors in between. So, the feminine is the one who's in deep relationship, connectivity, intuitive, sensitive, attuned, the one who's in touch with feeling, the one who's in touch with imagination. Um, and it's really the suppression of this that, and the fear of this. So, really, if we look at the history, there's been it's like, because it can't, all of these aspects of us can't be controlled, and they come to us, they reveal to us, they awaken us, they initiate us, they show us. And in the kind of logos driven culture, we've seeked to repress and control nature. We've seeked to compress the wild, and the wildness can't be controlled. So, and that's created a fear because, and then a separation. So we then need to be able to resource ourselves, to know ourselves, to plug ourselves back in, and then welcome that dance with the unknown, with the divinity, with the erotic, with the mystery. And that's when the true living really comes online.
Yeah, it's like the I always think of the left brain, right brain thing as well. It's like the left brain was dominated and everything was so precise and controlled and individuated. And the right brain is like the field. The right brain is the context. It's all around the edges. It's everything, and it's much more nebulous and imprecise and it enveloping. It really contains as well. Whereas the other side is like the point rather than the whole. So, and that, I mean, that completely falls in with what you were saying about this whole context of the world being your lover. It really fits with that for me when you talk about that. And I know there's such a kind of warm, nice feeling that I get with all of that. It's like, oh, yeah, we could just let go back into this bigger thing that can contain us. And there's a tremendous sense, I can see where the fear is in people. And it's something, in some ways, it's something I've been exploring because I used to be a very private person. Like the idea of doing this, even doing a video call for me would be like, no, there's no way I'm going to do that. But to do a video call, record it, and then anyone could see it, that would be off the spectrum. And it relates to that, I think. It's a fear of, like, these things need to stay hidden because I'm afraid of something. But actually, the tremendous sense of release and opening and a sort of upwelling of personal power, I suppose, like power in a good sense, power in that way you're talking about, where you're reclaiming this, your fullness, your authority, who you actually are, and putting that out there in your truth without any fear or shame or sense of, oh, I shouldn't do that, that's kind of big-headed, or you're being sort of an exhibitionist or something. And it's not that at all. It's just, it's like a tree or a plant will just kind of grow and flower and put themselves out into the world in that way, in a very natural, effortless, it's very simple, and I really feel that. And it's so kind of, oh, it's just so freeing, and I guess that's quite sexy. Freeing is sexy to me anyway. It's like it's got that erotic angle to it. There's something, it's like being naked outside on the ground in the sunshine. It's such an incredible feeling. There's a wonderful bit of coastline here, a little village called Stiffkey on the North Norfolk coast, and it's got this, there's an area of marsh between the land and the sea, and then there's a huge area of sand which dries out at low tide. And even in the height of the summer, you can walk out there and hardly see another soul. And I often go out there in the summer and just go naked, just walk. And you can walk for miles naked. And the sense of freedom and well-being and health and vitality from just walking on sand that's just been cleansed by the sea. So, like energetically reset, completely new land in a way. And the wind and the breeze is touching all your body and your skin, and the sun maybe. It just feels great. And I want everyone to try that. If you haven't done it, get naked and walk somewhere like that.
Yeah.
Know what it is to be alive. That's my feeling,
Yeah, exactly. The fullness of living, it's amazing.
How about Dartmoor? So let's get onto the land. How's that kind of relationship that you're now at the beginning of, really, with the actual place? How's that unfolding for you? And are you sort of going out there and finding your places that speak to you, that are, talk about that a bit, because that excites me as well, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I feel I have many places all over the world that speak to me, and they've become like portals that when I enter into, they're like the worlds that are open for me. And so, and now Dartmoor is one of those. And so it's very steeped in magic, this place, and the rocks and the stone formations and the waters. And so, yeah, this land is revealing itself to me, and in the ways that I'm making myself available to it.
So you're taking people in your work onto Dartmoor, and
At the moment, I work online.
obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
But the idea is, yeah.
And then no, well, and then we do a retreat in Crete in the summer after the Spiral one. So we take people to Crete, and then Spiral 2 and Spiral 3 are more Dartmoor based. Um, and then, but then the Vision Quest is in Crete. So as part of Spiral 2, we do a Vision Quest, and that's in Crete.
Okay, so talk about Vision Quest, because this is an interesting process. Talk about, you've done Vision Quests, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
probably more than once. Can you talk a bit about your experience of Vision Quest and what that is for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about?
Yeah, so Vision Quest is a ceremony where you go out for 4 days and 4 nights without any food. You just take water, and it's a ceremony of, really, in the traditional indigenous cultures, it's a crying for your vision. So it's like lamenting, you're in the village and you know that we've lost our way as human beings, we've lost connection, and something's deeply amiss. And the Vision Quest comes at a time where you are on your knees, essentially in lament of the state of the world, and you it's like a crying out to the mystery, to the great mystery, is like, tell me how I can serve, how can I serve you, how can I contribute, how can I be of service to you. And so it's like a going into the wild world in lament and in prayer of this service that you deeply desire to bring back. And so the indigenous cultures, they used to do this yearly. They used to quest and come back, and then whatever vision they received out in the wild for those 4 days, they then used to go and enact it, because they knew that that's how the mystery, or God, or however you want to call the divine forces of nature that we're encompassed in, wanted them to enact and embody. So the Vision Quest is that. Yeah.
So the way you say it, does that include, because it wasn't clear then, does that include just a personal crisis that you might be going through? Because you frame it in this way of, you have this desire to do something, or you're looking for something to do in the world, but could it come from just a sense of your life as it is now doesn't quite work for some reason, and you're trying to find a way, that more personal sense? Or is that not what it is for you?
Yeah, I mean, it can be. I think it depends. Everybody's at different stages of their of their um, of their journey, of their psycho-spiritual journey. So yes, you can definitely go out and quest for personal, and that would just mean that you're at a certain point of your developmental journey. So, and this is something that Bill goes into in his map, Nature and the Human Soul, which can be found in that book. But really, the descent of the underworld is you're going in service of something much bigger than you. So it just depends where you are in terms of your journey.
It's an interesting idea to do it every year. That sounds like a really good idea.
I think for 4 years, I think part of the Red Path is for 4 years. You do it every year for 4 years.
Well, just as a kind of, just to sort of check back in, as a kind of habit, it sounds like a really useful idea to me.
Mm-hmm.
As a way of just seeing where you're at again, and letting go of things that maybe don't serve you anymore. And, as a process to kind of revisit regularly, it seems quite interesting to me. So Go on. So you going to say
Yeah, well, I think, it's like all of these practices serve to expand our consciousness beyond what we know. And so what we, before embarking on any of these, we were in a certain cosmology or consciousness. And then by continually making ourselves vulnerable through all of the different practices that can bring us closer to the land and to soul, our orientation to the world changes. So, the wisdom of doing it for 4 years is that you deepen into a consciousness that wasn't available to you before.
So, when was your first vision quest, and how did you experience that? What was that like?
My first vision quest was in Cornwall in 2012, I think. 2012 or 2013. And then my second vision quest was out in the States in Southwest Utah, whilst on the year-long journey with Animus Valley and Bill Plotkin. And what I really appreciate about the Animus Valley work is that it's a way of, it's a soul initiation journey through nature that is adapted to our Western psychology. So instead of, Bill's never trained with any indigenous peoples, and he's really gone through the realm of depth psychology and Jungian psychology and nature-based work, and he's developed a nature-based map based on the Western psychology. So the first one I did was a kind of a more indigenous mirroring of the ceremony, and then the second one was the Animus Valley one, which was more suited to my Western psychology, and so it had more of a profound revelatory effect. And because it's also deeply steeped in the model that Bill has created over the years of his work, so there's a real kind of mapping of the territory of soul within his model. And he's studied, he's created this over 40 years. And so it's really his genius. And that really works for us as Westerners, rather than trying to go in and copy and take from the indigenous peoples who have a completely different orientation and psychology to the world.
So, what book are you willing to talk about that first experience a bit? Like what actually happened for you?
Well, they say that what happens on Vision Quest stays on Vision Quest.
Okay.
And yeah, one of the wisdoms is you don't necessarily share your story, but that your story or what happens for you on Vision Quest will be enacted, will be felt in your embodiment of how you're bringing forth your gifts in the world.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. So is this something you're now guiding people on yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've trained with Bill, and then I'm now a guide for Animus, and I've also trained as an experimental actress, and I've also trained as a deep feminine facilitator. So I weave all of these 3 modalities together. And for me, it's really about the expression of our Eros. It's about expression and embodiment. And like you said, coming into this fullness, coming into this unveiling. And so what I really love about the theatre is it's a complete permission to allow that what's hidden. This, something that I hear time and time again is this longing to be seen. And I've just created a video actually that I'm going to post out, I think, in my newsletter that's going out on the full moon, about this phenomenon of being seen. Because it's like, okay, here we are, me and you, and I see you, Tim, but it's like, it's deeper than that. It's the longing to be seen is, is longing to be seen in the soul. So all of, the theatre, so what?
Yeah, so what's an experimental actress? Because I don't know what that is as a thing.
It's a very unique modality of it's called experiment. It's based on the laboratory technique of theatre. So I trained in Barcelona full time in a 3-year course, a 3-year training, and it's based on the laboratory methodology. And so if you're not, if you don't know anything about theatre, you might not, but some people might know about Grotowski, so it's akin to Grotowski, and it's really about investigating. So it's an experiment. It's like theatre as an experiment, as a laboratory. So every day we go in and we investigate and we unearth, and it's like opening the channels of our normal everyday perception, going into altered channels. So it's kind of like quite a shamanic art form. It's like, for me, every time that I was there, it's like, this is what art is at its root. It's a shamanic act. It's about going into the other world. It's about going into the deep unconscious and then allowing that to come forth and find expression.
So you're exploring beyond everyday consciousness
Exactly.
to a deeper sort of experience of being human.
Exactly.
Through creative.
Exactly.
Improvisation or explorations. Just yeah. Yeah, this idea, because the art was my background's in art, so the origins of art, I feel much more strongly, are, as you're saying, kind of shamanic, or this kind of creative impulse is much more mixed in with the spiritual when you go further back in time, which is its rightful place. And part of my particular struggle with this culture was that whenever I was engaged in making art and creating situations or events or things, it didn't fit with what the culture was wanting it to be, because to me it was so much bigger and deeper and more meaningful than something that you just buy in some way or consume, or and so I could never make that fit. But now, having kind of explored many things on my journey, I'm realizing actually it was just this, it was part of a beginning of our cultural reintegration with this bigger thing that's been going on my whole lifetime, and I'm just a part of that exploration for where art wants to go back, which is like returning home. It wants to go back to its relationship with, community and well-being and spirituality and eros and all of those things, because they're all part of the same language of being alive. So I'm quite fascinated by this idea of this experimental theatre, this modality you're talking about. And also, you must know Jodorowski, is that how you say his name? Yeah.
Jodorowski.
Yeah, some of that stuff he's been doing in France, that, what do they call it, where the name is gone. So basically he's like doing these sessions where people turn up, anyone can show up, and they're recreating situations from people's lives. Do you know about this stuff? I saw some videos. I don't speak French, which is really frustrating because I just had subtitles, but I'd really have liked to have heard the people what they were saying directly. But basically, from what I can understand, it's a kind of psychodrama. Is it psychodrama, maybe? So basically, you might you show up at this thing. Anyone can show up.
Oh yeah, I know what you
Something
mean.
has happened, in your life when you were a child. Something happened, and maybe you get up on the stage with him, and you're playing you. Everyone's playing a part, right? But then you pick someone in the audience who is going to be your uncle or your neighbor, or so you pick all the other characters in this situation. But because you're picking intuitively, like you're looking in the audience thinking, oh, yeah, that person is like my dad for some reason, or my neighbor, or you bring them all together, and then you recreate a situation, and you all play this part, and something really profound happens because you're actually acting it out, first of all, but you've also intuitively picked other people, and maybe something is coming up and happening for them by doing it in unexpected ways, and it seems like it's tapping in to some unconscious realm and kind of bringing things up and working through them using a kind of creative act and a sort of showing yourself as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not doing it justice from what I've seen, but I would, for you, it might be really interesting to look into what he was doing there.
Yeah, no, I do know of Jodorowsky, and I do know the work that he does.
But reminded me of that. Or it feels like there's this crossover happening between healing and art,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, like everything is being drawn back together, and ceremony and ritual and all of these things are resurrecting in some way in our culture. It maybe, have you heard of Terence McKenna talking about the archaic revival?
Mm.
Okay, so this is something, this is another area where there seems to be this kind of, these ancient things are seemingly coming back into our life, are being brought back. It's like a revival of ancient things, although it's not the same. It's like the spiral. We're sort of further up the spiral, even though we're
Mm-hmm.
back in the same place, but one whole revolution up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like there is a real, so a lot of these ancient practices are kind of being reborn in a new form.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like that to me, like the artist in me is kind of noticing that and wanting to bring together these very seemingly different things and mix them in one context.
Mm-hmm.
And it relates to all the things you've been talking about. It's like bringing all of these things back together and seeing what that looks like as a basis for community and life. And yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There we
Mm.
are.
Yeah, I think there's I feel like nature has her law, and as we're remembering and coming back, those laws and those primordial ancient wisdoms that are so part of our human soul, like the anything and everything can happen, but the soul can't be uh, gotten rid of. And so even as we evolve and get more technologically advanced and move further away from soul, really, as human beings, the soul can't be eradicated. So the longings and the meaning and um, the existential kind of purpose for us being here is never going to go away. And so it's really just about how we remember to be human, and therefore all of those ancient ways can remain, and as you said, just in a different spiral form. But if we lose touch of all of that, then we lose culture and we also lose soul. And so it's about constantly like turning the other way and going, no, look back here, look this way, look. And that's going against our mainstream culture, but it's so necessary to step outside of that box.
It's like I imagine it like an elastic band. The further we pull ourselves away from soul,
Mm,
the stronger is the force wanting to pull us back, so that when it finally releases, it poof,
mm,
snaps back. And I feel like we're really at that place now where there's such a strong pull back to these things, and it seems to be almost exponentially increasing at the moment to me.
mm-hmm.
Like the
Oh, let's hope so.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that
Mm-hmm.
because it just we can't continue the way we're going. It's just it's all falling apart. And the tighter we're holding on to control, the more it's slipping away. That's what I'm seeing, and I guess that's the optimist in me as well. But it's pretty uncomfortable right now, isn't it? Where we're at, but yeah, I really feel it. I mean, I deeply feel it. I guess I feel it from the land up. Like, yeah, it's strong. It's a really strong sense of being pulled back home.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, and we might not see that in our lifetime, but whatever we do in this lifetime contributes to the next. the generation of our children and their children. So it's really like, yeah, seeing this for the big vision that it is. It's the work of the next 400 years at least. So that this coming back, this remembering, this coming home. But, you know, this is why I feel it's very important that we find our soul, our eros, and we align with that and we live that into the world in the best possible way that we can in this lifetime. And then, because whatever we leave is going to stay.
Yeah, really finding who you are, your truth, and uncovering that, revealing that, and gifting that to the world. Because that's all the world wants from us, right? It just wants us to flower in that unique way that is our flower for the world.
Exactly. Our song, our dance, our myth, our poetry.
Great. Well, maybe that's us then. God,
Thank you,
there's
Tim.
so much we could get into. We didn't even touch on dancing or any of that, but perhaps another time. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Tim.
Great. And see you soon, I hope. Okay.